The Upanisads, translated by F. Max Muller. Rammohun Roy. Greater, however, than the influence exercised on the philosophical thought of modern Europe has been the impulse which these same Upanishads have imparted to the religious life of modern India at about the same year, 1774 or 1775, when the first manuscript of the Persian translation of the Upanishads was received by Anquetil de Peron. Rammohun Roy was born in India, the reformer and reviver of the ancient religion of the Brahmins. Born 1774, died at 2:30 a.m. on Friday, the 28th September 1833. A man who in his youth could write a book against the idolatry of all religions, and who afterwards expressed in so many exact words his belief in the divine authority of Christ. Last Days of Rammohun Roy by Mary Carpenter, 1866, page 135. Was not likely to retain anything of the sacred literature of his own religion unless he had perceived in it the same divine authority which he recognized in the teaching of Christ. Now, see, the divine authority and being divine is not quite the same thing, right? Because Christ, Emmanuel, actually pronounced Christias and Amnual. He rejected the Puranas. He would not have been swayed in his convictions by the authority of the laws of Manu, or even by the sacredness of the Vedas. He was above all that. But he discovered in the Upanishads and in the so-called Vedanta something different from all the rest, something that ought not to be thrown away, something that, if rightly understood, might supply the right native soil in which alone the seeds of true religion, of true Christianity, might spring up again and prosper in India as they had once sprung up and prospered from out the philosophies of Origen or Senensius. European scholars have often wondered that Rammohun Roy, in his defense of the Veda, should have put aside the Samhitas and the Brahmanas and laid his finger on the Upanishads only as the true kernel of the whole Veda. Historically, no doubt, he was wrong, for the Upanishads presuppose both the hymns and the liturgical books of the Veda. And there's a lot more Upanishads than people like to typically admit. I saw a list of 300-something of them. But as the ancient philosophers distinguished in the Veda between the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda, between works and knowledge, as they had themselves pointed to the learning of the sacred hymns and the performance of sacrifices as a preparation only for that enlightenment which was reserved as the highest reward for the faithful performance of all duties. M.M. History of Ancient Sanskrit Literature, page 319. Rammohun Roy, like Buddha and other enlightened men before him, perceived that the time for insisting on all that previous discipline, with its minute prescriptions and superstitious observances, was gone, while the knowledge conveyed in the Upanishads, or the Vedanta, and developed, though it may be in strange coverings, should henceforth form the foundation of a new religious life. The adoration of the invisible Supreme Being is exclusively prescribed by the Upanishads, or the principal parts of the Vedas, and also by the Vedanta. Rammohun Roy, translation of the Kena Upanishad, Calcutta, 1816, page 6. M.M. History of the Ancient Sanskrit Literature, page 320. He would tolerate nothing idolatrous, not even in his mother, poor woman, who after joining his most bitter opponents confessed to her son before she set out on her last pilgrimage to Juggernaut, where she died, that he was right, but that she was a weak woman and grown too old to give up the observances which were a comfort to her. It was not therefore from any regard to their antiquity or the sacred character that Rammohun Roy clung to the Upanishads, that he translated them into Bengali, Hindi, and English, and published them at his own expense. It was because he recognized in them seeds of eternal truth, and was bold enough to distinguish between what was essential in them and what was not, a distinction, as he often remarked, with great perplexity, which Christian teachers seemed either unable or unwilling to make. Last Days, page 11. Well, what's essential from a religious tradition for person to person? The most essential, that often varies, other than like the details for the required prayer or the most essential beliefs that are just straight up listed like that. Some people would gravitate more towards something that's like for example, time of day related things. Well, the time of year, whether it's slips with the solar year or not. Some people are going to prefer certain times by their character or their material situation. Same thing with the times of day or night. The death of that really great and good man during his stay in England in 1833 was one of the severest blows that have fallen on the prospects of India, but his work has not been in vain. Like a tree whose first shoot has been killed by one winter frost, it has broken out again in a number of new and more vigorous shoots. For whatever the outward differences may be between the Adi Brahmo Samaj of Debendranath Tagore or the Brahmo Samaj of India, Akashub Chandra Sen, or the Sadharan Brahmo Samaj, the common root of them is all the work done once for all by Rammohun Roy. That work may have disappeared from sight for a time, and its present manifestations may seem to many observers who are too near not very promising, but in one form or another, under one name or another, I feel convinced that the work will live. In India, Schopenhauer writes, our religion will now and never strike root. The primitive wisdom of the human race will never be pushed aside there by the events of Galilee. On the contrary, Indian wisdom will flow back upon Europe and produce a thorough change in our knowing and thinking. Here again, the great philosopher seems to me to have allowed for himself to be carried away too far by his enthusiasm for the less known. He is blind for the dark sides of the Upanishads, and he willfully shuts his eyes against the bright rays of eternal truth in the Gospels, which even Rammohun Roy was quick enough to perceive behind the mists and clouds of tradition that gather so quick around the sunrise of every religion. Well, if Jesus really fulfilled anything, well, that doesn't, maybe there'd be some new rules for this, for the time or place or something, but, those old truths, what remains of them would be a confirmation. Well, I mean, the whole Jesus thing would be a confirmation of those truths. And it's important to remember, not just, because people have this idea, oh, this stuff's totally new. It's like, it's really not.